Hello, kindergarten families. Today we are working in Unit 4, Matter, beginning on Lesson 7, Changing Matter Portfolio. This portfolio takes 2 lessons to complete, so we'll work on Lesson 7 and 8 today. During Lesson 8 is when you'll turn in your completed portfolio. Before we begin, let's look at your lesson to see that objective and those key words. Our objective is what we want to do. In this portfolio, you will think like a scientist about what happens when you change matter. Here are some key words for you. A chemical change is a type of change when something new is made. Matter is anything that has mass and takes up space. And a physical change is a change in matter that does not change what the matter is. In this portfolio, you will think like a scientist. That means you will follow steps to study and learn things. Look at this chart and think about each step. So here's how we can think like a scientist. Here are all of the parts that we are going to do today. Right here is an anchor chart that you can look at now or at the end whenever you need to refer back and know what these steps might be to make sure that you've done them all. But we're going to do them all together today. Scientists investigate. They ask questions like, how can you change clay? They use their senses to observe. They plan. They conduct an investigation. They collect data. They reflect about what they learned in their investigation. So we're going to do that today too. Remember, matter is anything that takes up space and has mass. Matter can be big, it can be so small that you cannot see it. Matter can have a physical change, or matter can have a chemical change. In this portfolio, you will conduct an investigation. You will make a physical change to matter. So here's the first worksheet that you're going to want to complete. This is a KWLH chart. We are going to look at what this chart looks like. We're going to look at the 2 first sections that we need to fill out now, and then we're going to look at some examples that the lesson has included also. So here's the blank chart. What I know is what the K stands for, and what I want to know is what the W stands for. Those are the only 2 parts that we are completing today. So here is my KWLH chart and the 2 sections that I have completed right now. I've got my name at the top, I've got the date, everything is in my best handwriting, and it's my own work. So what I already know, well, I got this information from the part that I just read. I wrote, matter takes up space and has mass. We just learned that in the lesson. It can be big or small. We just learned that too, right? So those are 2 things that I already know. For what I want to know, I said, how can matter have a physical change, right? That's what I need to do. I need to know that. And then I also wrote, how can matter have a chemical change? We just learned about physical and chemical changes, right? So let me show you the examples that are also included in this lesson. If you click on that second box, it's going to take you to this example, and there are a lot of sentences. Do you need to write this many sentences? No, but these are great examples if you just want to write 1 or 2 like I did. It says, matter is anything that has mass and takes up space. You already know that. Matter can be changed. Some changes can be undone. Maybe you do already know that. Some changes cannot be undone. In a chemical change, something new is made. In a physical change, the matter does not change. So here's a lot of information. Maybe you know some of it, maybe you don't. You only want to write down what you know so far. Then for what I want to know, they have a lot of questions too. You don't have to write this many, not at all. 1 or 2 is perfect. Can I change clay? Is changing clay a physical change or a chemical change? Can I change clay back after I changed it? Can I change paper? Is changing paper a physical change or a chemical change? And can I change paper back after I change it? So there's a whole lot of questions there. Remember, you don't have to ask that many. 1 or 2 will be fine. Think like a scientist about changing matter. You can think like a scientist about what happens when you change matter. In this portfolio, you will investigate what happens when you change matter. You will ask questions about how matter can be changed. We just ask some questions, right? What we want to know. Observe what happens to matter that changes. Plan an investigation. Conduct an investigation and reflect or think about your investigation. So, in your science journal, we're going to do all of this, but you can use those printable worksheets or you can complete them in your science journal. You shouldn't have to write anything extra today. Everything should be on those included worksheets. All right, so remember, you will send your work to your teacher and it will be graded. So we want to do the best we can. Here's a rubric. I'm going to look at this at the end of our lesson so we can make sure that we've checked off everything we need to get the very best grade. Now we have a new objective. In this portfolio, you will ask questions about what happens to matter when it is cut, torn, crumpled, smashed, or rolled. So those are a lot of different things we can do to try to change matter. Remember, matter has mass and takes up space, and a physical change is a change in matter that does not change what the matter is. So the matter is still staying the same form, but we might be changing the shape or how that form looks. Changing matter. Matter takes up space. It has mass. You can make a physical change to matter. You can cut it, you can tear it, you can crumple it, you can smash it, you can even roll it. Not every type of matter, right? But we're going to either be using paper or clay. So with those things, we can do most of those different things to it, right? That will work. You will investigate changing paper or clay. You will ask questions. You will plan. You will carry out your plan. Then you will reflect on what you learned. Look at the photo. This little girl is experimenting with paper, right? How is the student changing the paper? Looks like she's folding it, changing its shape, changing its size as far as how it looks, right? It's still the same amount of matter. That didn't change. It still has the same mass, but she's changing the size that it looks. It looks smaller, probably folded. So yeah, she's making a couple of different changes there, physical changes. Scientists begin investigations by asking questions. This is an important step in thinking like a scientist. So think about, what questions do you have about the world? Or in this one, what questions do you have about matter? How to ask questions. You ask questions every day. Scientists do too. A great way to start asking questions is to use the 5 W's and an H. Look at this table and use it to help you plan. So here are the different types of questions: what, where, when, why, how, and who. Here are some examples. Now you might want to refer back to this later because we're going to fill another worksheet where we have a lot of questions. So you might want to use these ones later. Answer the questions and do the activity. Remember, science is very important. Use your inside voice when you talk. And remember to use the words matter and investigation in your answers. So talk with your learning coach now. What is the first stage of an investigation? What is an example of a change that you can make to matter? All right, so here's that concept web. This is where we're going to ask those W and H questions. So if you click on this first one, there's a printable version, or if you have it in your science journal already, that's perfectly fine. If you can't do either, using a plain sheet of paper is fine as well. Down here, we're going to have some examples that we can go over together. All right, so this is what the worksheet looks like when you print it out. This is a concept web. It's already titled for us, so that's nice. In the center, we're going to want to give our center box a title as well, though, that talks about what we are talking about or asking about today. So here's my example. In the center box, I wrote, my changing matter investigation. So all of these questions have to do with how I am investigating matter. So I started with a who question. Who can help me find some clay, right? If I want to investigate clay, I need some. What will happen if I roll clay? Will it have some changes? Where should I use the clay? Clay can get kind of messy, right? So I want to make sure I do it in the right spot, and I want to make sure my clay doesn't get dirty. That can happen too. When will the clay harden? Depends on what type of clay you're using, but sometimes they can get hard, right? I don't want that to happen too soon. Why is clay soft? Why does it start out that way? And how can I make the clay smaller? So these are all questions that I might want to investigate. Let's look at the examples that are included in your lesson as well, just in case you don't want to use mine. All right, so here are the questions that are asked in the example in the lesson. Who can help me with my investigation? That's very similar. What will happen if I smash the clay? Where is the best place to work with the clay, or where do I want to conduct my investigation? When is the best time to do an investigation, and when do people change clay? Why does the matter need to be changed, and why am I doing this investigation? How will the shape of clay change, or how will I do this investigation? So you don't have to have this many questions. On many of these boxes, they have more than one. Just one question per box is perfectly fine. And remember, it doesn't have to be the same questions I asked, and it doesn't have to be the same as these examples either. It can be any question that you have about your own investigation. All right, let's see. Here is another objective. In this portfolio, you will observe what happens to matter when it is cut, torn, crumpled, smashed, or rolled. Here are those keywords again. We have matter, anything that has mass and takes up space, and a new keyword, reasoning, thinking about something in a careful, logical way to draw conclusions or to support arguments. So that's when you're trying to prove what's going to happen, right? How can you change matter? Watch the video to learn more. So in this video, you can observe the artist. You can think about, how is he changing the clay? He uses a tool to cut it. He uses a wheel to change its shape. He uses his hands too. Remember, you can change matter in these ways. You can cut it, tear it, crumple it, smash it, or roll it. When you use reasoning, you use what you know to figure things out. Using reasoning is a 21st century skill. You can use your senses to observe people changing matter. You can use reasoning to come up with your own ideas for an investigation. So remember, you can ask yourself, how did the artist in the video change the clay? Observing. Scientists observe. They use their senses. They watch an artist work with clay. They feel the clay. They listen to the sounds it makes when they squish it. Observing is a very important step in thinking like a scientist. All right, there's that anchor chart again. Ask yourself about observing changes. How can you observe changes to a piece of paper? So there are some pictures down here, some examples. What senses can you use to observe cutting paper? What does it mean to observe? How can you observe changing matter? Use reasoning. And what is one way you can change paper? Talk about all of these questions with your learning coach. Remember, you can go back a page and look at those pictures again if you need to. All right, so now we have a 2-column chart. You're going to want to print this out or complete it in your science journal, or make one of your own on a plain sheet of paper. Here's what it looks like when it's blank. There's no titles in either of these columns, so we're going to have to do that ourselves, but there is a title at the top. What happened to the matter? 2-column chart. So here's my example. I titled both columns to show what I would be writing about. I have the change I made and what happened. So you complete this after you've done your investigation, after you have changed your paper or your clay. So for my first one, I said I ripped the clay. So let me show you what that's going to look like. I've got not even any fancy clay. You can buy clay. I think you can even find it at the dollar store now, but I just used some Play-Doh. I had some Play-Doh at home, and so that's what I used for my clay. So the first one, I ripped the clay. Boop. There it is. I ripped it, right? You could also use the word tore. They're synonyms. They mean the same thing. And so I wrote what happened. Now there are 2 pieces. All right, next I rolled the clay. You can roll it right in your hands or on a table if your parent or caretaker says that's okay. When I roll it, what happens? I wrote, it got longer. All right, my next one is I squished the clay. So I'm going to squish it between my hands. You can also squish it on a flat surface like a table if you're allowed to. What happened to it now? Look at it. It's kind of like a pancake, right? I said it got flatter. All right, next one says I twisted the clay. So I took my clay after it was flattened and I twisted it around like this. Oh, look at that. All right, what happened? I said it had many lines. See all those lines you can see going through it? It had many lines after I twisted it. And then the last one, I folded the clay. So I took my clay, boop, folded it right on top of itself. What happened? It looked smaller. Was it smaller? No, but it looked smaller. It wasn't as long as it was before. All right, so that's my two-column chart. Let's look at the example that they also have in the lesson for you. So you don't have to have my same answers, and you don't have to have these same answers either, but here are a few more examples. For the first change that was made in the example, they cut the clay. So maybe they used a little butter knife, maybe they used some scissors. And it says the pieces of the clay became smaller and there were designs in the clay. So that's what happened. Now I just titled that column what happened, but they titled it what happened to the matter. That's a nicer, longer title. But if you don't want to write that much, what happened with a question mark is fine. All right, next they rolled the clay and the clay became long and thin. I tore the clay. It made many smaller pieces of clay. I crumpled the clay. It changed the shape. And I smashed the clay. The clay became thin and flat. So remember, your answers do not have to be exactly the same as this, and they don't have to be exactly the same as mine either. So this is the end of lesson 7. If you are doing this over the course of 2 or even 3 days, that is absolutely okay. And this is a great stopping point for day 1 if you haven't already decided to stop. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my course outline and go to lesson 8. This is where we're going to complete just a few more worksheets and we're going to turn all of those worksheets in together at the end for your teacher. We have a new objective. In this portfolio, you will plan an investigation to show how the shape of paper or clay can be changed by cutting, tearing, crumpling, smashing, or rolling. My keywords are investigation, a process that works toward an answer in science, and matter, anything that has mass and takes up space. Changing matter. Clay is matter. It has mass and it takes up space. You can change it. How can you create something new with the clay? Can you change the shape of matter? Do you think you can change the shape of paper or clay? You can find out. You can investigate. When you think creatively, you come up with some new ideas. Thinking creatively is a 21st century skill. You can think of ways to change the shape of paper or clay. You can choose one way. You can try it. You can see if the shape of the paper or clay changes. So here, ask yourself this question and talk with your learning coach. What is one way that you can think creatively about something new? Plan an investigation. In this section, you will plan an investigation. You will investigate whether you can change the shape of paper or clay. So look, we've asked, we've observed, and now we're planning the investigation. Use the image gallery to help you plan your investigation. So if you click View Gallery here, you can look at many different photos and pictures showing some examples to you. You can talk about these questions at home. What is an investigation? What is one step you can take to plan an investigation? What is one way you can change clay? Right? And we've already done that in this video. All right, so here's our Changing Matter Planner. You're going to want to either print out this worksheet, write these questions down yourself on a plain piece of paper, or complete this in your science journal. Here's what the blank printable version looks like. And here's the example. So for the example, number 1, what do you want to investigate? They wrote, I want to find out if I can change the shape of matter. Number 2, what type of matter will you try to change? They said, I will try to change clay. Number 3, what do you want to find out? Their answer was, I want to find out if cutting, tearing, crumpling, smashing, or rolling matter makes it another kind of matter. Number 4, how will you change your matter? I will tear, smash, and roll my clay. And number 5, How will you know if you change the shape of your matter? I will take before and after pictures to see how the clay changed. So I filled out this worksheet too. My answers are just a little bit different. I wanted them to be a little shorter or a little more concise because especially for a kindergartner, it helps when your sentences are not so lengthy. So for number 1, I wrote, can matter change? That was what I wanted to investigate. For number 2, I said, I will use clay. For number 3, I said, can I change the shape of matter? For number 4, I said, I will twist, roll, and squish it. And for number 5, I wrote, I will observe it. So I wanted to make those answers a little shorter, a little more concise, just because in kindergarten, it can take some time to write those questions out, right? Or those answers out. You don't want to write super, super long things. All right, let's go back to your lesson. You are almost done. Here is that worksheet again, those example answers, and here is our lesson. So down here when it shows you the different things you can do in your science journal, remember, completing these worksheets are going through these steps as well. So you don't need to double up on your work. You don't have to do the worksheet and add this in a separate location as well. All right, there's that rubric again. We'll look at that in the end. In this portfolio, you will investigate how the shape of paper or clay can change by cutting, tearing, crumpling, smashing, or rolling it. We've still got that objective. Our keywords are investigation, a process that works toward an answer in science, and matter, anything that has mass and takes up space. Paper is matter. It has mass and it takes up space. Look at the picture. What are they doing to the paper? You might know the name. This is called origami, right? It's paper folding. So they're folding that paper up into a different shape. What other ways can you change the paper? You can find out. You can do an investigation. You use and manage information when you get information from observing, investigating, or reading and then share it with others. Using and managing information is a 21st century skill. How will you manage and use what you have learned about changing matter? So think about this question as we continue on. How can you use what you have learned about changing matter? In this section, you will conduct an investigation. In the last section, you made a plan for your investigation. So this is still talking about with your clay or with your paper, what you're going to do, right? I showed you my example when I showed you that 2-column chart. All right, so you're going to follow your plan. Remember, you need to get the matter that you want to change. You need extra supplies, possibly, you might not. You need to follow your plan and make changes to your paper or clay. And then you need to think about how did the shape of the matter change? And is it a different kind of matter now? How did you change your matter? What matter did you try to change? How did you change your matter? And how did the shape of your matter change? We are going to complete one more worksheet. This is the Draw and Write worksheet. So if you click right here, you will have a printable version. You can draw a picture or take a picture of your investigation. If you want to take a photo of your clay, that's fine too. And then you're going to write about it. So here's the example included. It just says your drawing should show what matter you used and how you changed it. So either your paper or your clay. And then down here, they wrote a lot. They said, I made a clay pot from a ball of clay. First, I smashed the ball of clay into a pancake. I cut a small circle from the larger pancake. I cut the rest of the clay into strips. I rolled each strip into a long tube. I wrapped one tube around the small circle. I did this over and over with the remaining tubes. Then I smoothed the cracks in the pot. The shape of the matter changed from a ball of clay into a pot. The matter was still clay. That is very long, so I made my answers a little shorter. Here are my drawings. I showed my regular ball of clay, right? And I showed what it looked like when I twisted it with all those little lines. Then I showed my ball of clay again in its regular form. And then what it looked like when I squished it. It was kind of flat like a pancake. Kind of hard to show that on paper, but that's supposed to show it being squished flat. And then here's my clay again, and what happened when I ripped it, when I had 2 different parts, right? So here's what I wrote. I still wrote several sentences, but I made them a bit shorter. I changed the shape of my clay. I made it long, flat, 2 pieces, and more. It was still clay. The matter did not change, right? Even the amount, even the mass didn't change. I was just changing the way it looked or how it appeared. All right, so that's your last worksheet, but we still have to finish that KWLH chart. So we're not quite finished yet. Let's go back to your lesson and we're going to get to that part really soon. All right, so your draw and write section is complete. Remember, same thing with this Science Journal Investigate. You've already drawn your picture and you've already written about it. So you've already done that on that draw and write worksheet. What happens when you change matter? You used the think like a scientist process. You explored what happened. Now you can reflect on what you learned. So for our reflection, we're going to go back to that KWLH chart and we're going to fill in those last two columns. All right, so remember to complete our portfolio, we did all of these things. We asked questions. How can matter change? We observed. What happens to matter when you cut it, when you tear it, when you crumple it, smash it, roll it? We planned an investigation. How will matter change if you cut it, tear it, crumple it, smash it, roll it? And we conducted that investigation. How can matter change when you do these things to it? So let's go ahead and go back to our KWLH chart. We are going to write a little bit about what we learned. So the next section is L for learned. I didn't have it filled out already because I didn't want to show it to you completed at the beginning. But now we're going to write about what we learned. Just one or two quick sentences is fine. I'm going to write, I learned I could change the shape of matter, right? We didn't change the matter, it was still the same. And we didn't change the amount of it, but we did change the shape. So in my L column, now I have, I learned I could change the shape of matter. Now, how can I learn more? What could we do? I could do another investigation. That's one way, right? So I'm going to write that. Or what about reading? I always love to read more. I could read a book about matter. I always think we can learn so much. The more we read, the more we know. So you don't actually have to have both of those sentences, or you don't have to have either one. You can write what you can do or how you can learn more. So I wrote, I could do another investigation, or I could read a book about matter. Your responses, your KWLH chart does not have to be exactly like mine. This is just what I wrote for how I could learn more and what I learned today. All right, let's go back to your lesson. You are almost done. Look at what you wrote in your science journal or on that worksheet. That is your reflection. So when we reflect, we think about what we learned, we think about what questions we still have, and maybe how we can learn even more. So you don't have to write these additionally, but you can use these to help you fill out that KWLH chart if you would like to. Think about what new questions do you have now about changing matter. Sometimes you have more questions when you're done with an investigation than before you began. All right, get ready to turn in your portfolio. Make sure you have each part and work with your learning coach. So here's everything. Remember that reflect number 6 is actually going to go back up there on number 1. So you should really only have 5 worksheets, not 6. Before we end, let's look at that rubric and just make sure we have everything we need. Ask questions. Yep, we definitely have that. We did that on our KWLH chart and we did that on our concept web. Observe. Yeah, we definitely observed what happened when we did that investigation with that clay, and we wrote about it in that 2-column chart, right? We wrote what happened when we twisted it, when we ripped it, all of those different observations. Plan an investigation. Remember, we completed that planner sheet with those 5 questions that we answered. Conduct an investigation. That's what we did when we actually changed our clay or we changed our paper. And then we did the draw and write worksheet to show some of that information. And then the reflection. Remember, we went right back to our KWLH chart. We finished that what I learned column and that how can I learn more column. So we have everything to get a wonderful 15 out of 15 point score. So on your next sheet or on your next page of your lesson, you're just going to drop all of those worksheets into the Dropbox so your homeroom teacher can see them. And I bet you're going to do an amazing job. I'm Mrs. C. It was so wonderful helping you today. I hope you have a great week. Thank you so much. Goodbye.